G'day everyone, and welcome to the Feed My Mind podcast, and thank you for tuning into this frequency. My name's Anthony Ross, and I started this podcast because I'm passionate about two things in life. One of them is bringing out the best in others. I love to see people succeed and grow and become the best possible version of themselves. And if I can play even the smallest part in helping people on their journey, it gives me great joy and satisfaction. The other thing I'm passionate about is being curious and having an open mind for continual learning. I feel that when we attain new information, it provides perspective, which can change the way that we view our world and our place in it, which is where a lot of personal growth comes from. And that's why I'm here. Each episode, I'll be speaking with fascinating guests from all walks of life, hoping that there might be some insights or something that's going to resonate with you, which is going to help you on your journey to becoming the best version of yourself. If you like the podcast and want more information, head to our website, feedmymind.com.au, and follow us on social media. I'd like to give a special thank you to local Melbourne artist, Hawaii 94, for that beautiful introduction from the song titled Forever. All right, it's time to feed your mind. And we're live on the Feed My Mind podcast, and we have a very special guest today, Dustin Brown. So Dustin, welcome.
Thank you. I'm stoked to be here.
Thank you. So I think we're both feeling pretty zen at the moment. We've literally come straight from yoga class, so I'm feeling very relaxed, and I hope that you might notice that in the energy in the podcast this morning. So I thought I'd have Dustin on the show because on the surface, you've got a very, very interesting background. From what I've seen, you're an ex-pro surfer, a black belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and also now you've got your own yoga studio, which I think is a really, really interesting combination. So if you could maybe just give listeners a brief overview of yourself and obviously your history, because I think you've got so many interesting things going on.
Yeah, that's a general overview of the things I really like to do. I'm originally from Hawaii, and surfing brought me to Australia. It's a very fast-forward version of the story, and I met my wife and settled. And in doing so, I found new interest in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and over time, through the pain my body is in through that, I've discovered yoga after much convincing from Nova, my wife. And I tried yoga and was instantly kind of hooked in. And it's all, I've brought it down to one thing, one correlation between these modalities or what it is. I'm addicted to the flow state. That's where I like to be. I like to be in that point of flow where everything's just exactly as it should be, and it's a lot of non-thinking, just perfect reactions that come from all the patterns that you've laid over time. It's pretty cool.
Well, you just mentioned about 20 different things, which I want to go deeper on, which is okay. But the one thing which I think is the most poignant, which you just mentioned, was about flow state. There's a researcher, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce his name correctly. He talks about flow state. I think it's Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and he's written a book on flow and obviously the state of mind that you get in when you're in that flow state. We lose our appetite, we lose our sense of time, and just the creativity just goes straight on. That's from that perspective. But what does that mean to you, being in the flow state?
Yeah, it's that point of no mind where you might be doing something that's heavily involved, heavily technical, and mentally demanding, physically demanding, but you're in that state. You're not thinking about it. It's just happening. And you find this in surfing where, think of all the moving parts into catching and riding a wave. There's so much going on. There's the bottom sand or reef. There's the movement of the wave. There's wind. There's other people. There's submerged objects. There's all this going on. But at the same time, when you're in that moment, it's all sensation, and none of that matters. And especially like in critical situations, time actually slows down to like where it feels like it's moving super slow. The same thing happens in jiu-jitsu when you're rolling and you find that state of flow. It's the time can either feel like an eternity or like no time at all. You're like, oh my God, that 5 minutes, that felt like an hour. Mm-hmm. You're like, I was so involved. There's so much that went on in that short period of time. Or the same thing, like that was 5 minutes. It felt like a blink of an eye because it all happens. So all those things happen. It's pretty interesting. In the yoga, you get in that flow state as well, when you can really sync the breath with movement and you're not thinking of and striving to do more. That's when you hit that point. It just kind of just
It's really interesting, isn't it? And I think particularly in yoga, I've noticed that in a lot of the classes, both yourself and all the other teachers do mention that flow state quite often. I think it's even the name of one of your memberships or some of your memberships, grow your flow. So I think it's really important for a lot of people, obviously, to get in that flow state. But for some people, I find, especially myself being relatively new to yoga, I found that it's not always the easiest to get into that flow state. Do you have any tips for people that might be starting out or that are doing their yoga practice that just can't quite get into that flow state?
It will come with time. I think in surfing, you're just trying not to die the first 50 times you go surf.
Yep.
And at the same time, there's this addictive rush from riding a wave. You're like, oh my God, that was the best feeling I've ever felt. I want to feel that again. At the same time, I don't want to die. And it's like this element of fear, challenge, and also excitement and gratification. So in yoga, I think we feel that. We go to a class. If you felt that you were an amazing practitioner or you felt that you weren't, either way, like, you're going to feel good at the end. And so I think that's not to focus, even though it's hard, not to focus on your actual performance, to enjoy that process, not to be hard on yourself. And then that will come. It'll eventually come to a point where you're like, I'm doing those millions of things that I had to think about so much. Now it just all happens. Example, surfing, like, you're thinking, go under these waves, get out to the break, turn around, catch a wave, ride it, paddle in, get into the wave, blah, blah. And then it gets to a point where it's just like, I'm just doing it. I'm out there, I'm dipping, I'm riding, I'm gliding, I'm catching, I'm back out, and you just get into that flow. Same thing with yoga. There's an element of thought to it, but then with enough practice, you hit that point, you just hit onto your mat, you connect with your breath. You might get pulled out a couple times, but then you reconnect and you bring yourself right back to that state. So it's actually training and learning what your actual mind and system needs to achieve that state. Like, what are the conditions that I need to create so that I can find that flow state? And so you'll find it naturally happens with surfing and jiu-jitsu because you need so much focus, so much attention that everything else fades to the side. In yoga, you train yourself to do that. Our attention is so diffused, being pulled in every direction. And yet in the practice, you have to zero in to one point, your breath, one point of focus, and at the same time do 50 other thousand things. So that's what it is. I think that's it. You're doing highly complicated mental and physical things at the same time. It feels like none of that's happening. You're just one point of focus.
Really interesting. So even all through those explanations, you mentioned surfing a fair few times and you've referred back to that as, I guess, as an analogy and where I think you've got a lot of your lessons from. Are you able to give a brief overview of your background of surfing and obviously growing up in Hawaii and where that's led you and obviously here to Australia now?
Yeah, so I started surfing because my dad surfed. He just literally, that's why we ended up in Hawaii before he had kids. He wanted to raise them on the island in a surfing environment in a place where there was little to no crime. They didn't have to lock the doors to the house or the cars or anything like that. And so it's a beautiful island. It was just super relaxed. And he literally would chuck me in the water and take me surfing with him from about 2 years old. I have pictures of me like standing on a surfboard and just riding, no waves, but a current around this little lagoon and things like that. It was just part of it. And I remember being very fearful. And he would paddle out with me holding around his neck. He'd put me on his back and paddle out on a surfboard. And he'd catch little waves. And in my mind, they were huge. And then he'd hold me as he rode the wave. And I'd just be like so scared, but it was so fun. I wanted to do it again. And they got to the point where he would push me into waves. And then I remember I stopped being so into surfing. I got into bodyboarding. And I lost my dad for a bit. He was just like, oh, I have to disown you. I can't look at you anymore. You're one of those spongers, one of those boogers. And so that went on for a few years. And then one day we were surfing together. I was bodyboarding. He was surfing. He gave me a surfboard. He's like, just try it. You're going to love it. And literally, I remember the day exactly. I rode a wave for the longest and the fastest. I went the fastest I've ever gone in my whole life. And I was just like hooked instantly. I was like, oh, ditch the bodyboard. Give me a surfboard. And from there, it was just a full-blown obsession. I grew up with some really well-known surfers like Andy and Bruce Irons, Dustin Barca and Roy Powers, who all did well on the tour. And Andy's no longer with us, but did amazing things. And because of that caliber of surfing being around it, I never felt I was at that level. And those guys are actually like truly amazing. And I went to the States following love when I was about 19, 20. And over 4 years, settling into lifestyle in California, I got a job as a barman, was working the bars, and then I was striving to be a pro surfer. I wanted to get sponsors. I wanted to be a pro. And that was always my mission, but it just wasn't happening for me. And it hit one point, I was skateboarding a lot to improve my surfing. And I was in between jobs. I had a job that I would finish about 10 p.m. and I would skateboard to my car, hop in my car and drive to another job, a nightclub. And I'd work from like 10 to 2 p.m. and just slinging drinks at the bar, making excellent cash in the States as a barman. It was really, not the most healthy lifestyle, but I was young. I was early 20s, making great money. It was fun times. And skateboarding to my car to go change jobs, I broke my leg like really badly. I shattered my tibia and fibia, couldn't walk for a year, hospitalized. It was gnarly. And through that process, it really taught me a lot. I got really depressed and it was really a dark time. But at the same time, something lifted me up out of it. And I just wanted to get back in the water. I just wanted to surf. And so when it came time that I could surf, like the doctor's like, don't go surfing yet. You're going to take this off. You can wear a boot. I went surfing that day. It was like, I was back in the water. And a lot of times they were like, you're probably never going to surf the same way you did. You probably won't be able to walk without a limp or without some sort of limitation in the future. And I just didn't really take that as truth. I was like, I don't accept that. And so I did everything. I didn't have the money to do rehab or anything like that, but I started training, do little stand runs, and just taking it easy the way I knew how. And in that process, I met this guy who I knew through the bartending world, who was one of my bar regulars, who used to tip me very well. And he turned out to be the owner of an amazing brand who sponsored me, gave me a contract. I got to travel for 4 years around the world, which eventually brought me to Australia. I got to do some amazing things in that time, meet some amazing people. And one of those amazing people was my wife, Nova. And it was very interesting because it was at a time in my life where if you would have asked me, I would have said I would never get married. I would be like, are you getting married? Never.
Yeah.
I was loving life. It was good times. And we met and it was magic right away. We just never wanted to be apart from each other. And 12 years of marriage this year. And we've been together just around 13. We still can't get enough of each other. It's pretty special. So that's why I'm in Australia. It's all to do with Nova. And that kind of ties into how I started getting into jiu-jitsu, because when I first moved to Australia, it was during a Melbourne winter. And so I went from traveling all tropical places, always being warm, to being like, no, I want to be with Nova. I'm committing to this relationship. I'm going to be here. I'm going to move to Melbourne. And I got really fat. I just wasn't surfing. I wasn't as active as I was. I was eating delicious Melbourne food. And suddenly,
it'll do that to
suddenly
you.
I had 20 kilos on my frame that was never there before. And my friend came to visit me from Hawaii and he saw me. He's like, bro, what the fuck? You're so fat. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm not fat. He's like, dude, you're really fat. You need to do something about this. You're coming with me to training. I was like, oh, jiu-jitsu? I was like, oh, no, I don't want to get beat up. And he's like, no, it's cool. Try it. Trust me. So I went to jiu-jitsu and I got beat up. But it was really in an interesting way. It was like a little kid and a girl. They wrapped me up and showed me that I had no idea how to move on the ground, and that with a little bit of technique, someone that was much weaker and smaller than me could put me in my place pretty much effortlessly. And I found that very humbling, but in a fun way. Like, it didn't bruise my ego. I was like, wow, this is so cool. If they could do that to me, and it was fun, it was playful and with good energy. I was like, I want to learn more about this. And it was the hardest workout I think I've ever done in my whole life. I've done a lot of cardio. I think I've done all of the cardio modalities there are in this world, I think, possibly. Yeah. And there's nothing like when someone's trying to choke you or take your arm away off your body. You will fight the hardest, and your heart will beat harder than you've ever felt it beat in your life. And so that will make you incredibly fit incredibly quickly. So it's like, if that's the only benefit I get, that'll be really fun. Turn it into a full-blown obsession. And I've been a black belt for 3 years now, first degree. And so I've been doing jiu-jitsu for about 10 years in total. And I love it. It's one of these things. It's so involved. It's so technical. And it's like a chess game that you use your entire body against another person that's always changing and evolving. And it's amazing. So yeah, through jiu-jitsu, I found that my body got really tight, really sore. My wife started going to yoga. She started to convince me. She's like, you should try yoga. You should do this. And I was always like, no, that's for hippies. That's for girls. I don't need to, hang out with girls in leotards stretching. That sounds really lame. And I went to my first class. It was the old hot box off Chapel Street in Melbourne. And I remember after the first class, from all the jiu-jitsu, my hands and forearms were so tight. I actually would wake up with my hands in like little claws.
Really?
Like I wake up, my fingers curled in, couldn't open my hands, just really tight.
Just from the impact of the bags and all the grappling on the
So
ground?
jiu-jitsu, there's no punching or kicking. It's all grabbing and gripping. So like wrestling, but with submissions. Mm-hmm. So your goal is to submit the person. You can choke them. You can joint lock them. So take their joint to end range, where if they don't tap, you'll break the joint.
In an arm bar.
Yeah, arm bar. So wrist, elbow, shoulder, knee, ankle. There's hip stuff, but usually not. Even spine. So you can, vital structures, and you would want to protect. So that's what jiu-jitsu goes to attack. But it's also called the gentle art, because when done properly, you're not trying to kill the person or beat them into a bloody pulp. You're just trying to pacify them, submit them, so they can't beat you up anymore, so you can walk away. That's the goal. And yeah.
It's interesting how a lot of martial arts are like that. A lot of people who haven't either experienced martial arts or trained in martial arts think it's more of a combat sort of sport, whereas I think a lot of the time that those martial arts aren't. It's more about obviously the respect, getting in tune with your body, and learning the disciplines of the moves, which is a completely different angle. I guess that's what the traditional martial arts view it as.
Big time. Like, it is to protect yourself. It is to have a skill that if you were in any situation that, you could handle yourself. But then it gets kind of ridiculous. And people like to be like, oh, this one's better than this one. This one's better than this one. If you do a martial art, you should have your reasons. But those reasons shouldn't be able to, in your mind, like, I can defend myself against 15 people at once, like Bruce Lee in a movie or something like that. Those are movies. And I watched Jocko Willink. Have you... No, he's a famous Navy SEAL. He's an ex-military guy. He looks like the hardest man you could ever hope to meet. He's just like one of these Navy SEAL guys. And you're like, this guy probably eats like nails for breakfast and drinks whiskey like water. But he's like, if I got in a confrontation on the street, if someone started to attack me, I run away. This guy's probably snipered and done more insane things than we could possibly ever imagine. Yeah. And he's like, if someone attacks me on the street, I'm running away. I'm getting safe and getting free. He's like, if someone takes me to the ground, tries to hold me or attack me, then I use jiu-jitsu. I subdue them, and then I run away. He's like, I don't know where these people in their mind, they're like, what about 10 attackers? What about 5 attackers? He's like, you're going to get killed. They're going to beat you into a bloody pulp. So it's just important, like, we live in an environment where that type of thing doesn't really happen every day. Of course, if we were ever in one of those situations, we want to be able to defend ourselves, but we do it because it creates something more. It makes you respect your mind and body and that of others, and you realize that you're not so different than the person next to you. It's all these same lessons that we learn on the yoga mat that all the great masters talk about. It's just another vehicle to find that. And one teacher that I really respect described it like a big giant mountain. And this mountain is huge, and everyone is climbing this mountain. There's lots of paths up the mountain, and all these paths lead to the same town at the top. They all go to the same place. But one path goes this way, one path goes that way. And how do you know which path is your path? I think when you find someone that you resonate with that has already gone the way, they're like, this is the way, it's safe, I know this way. I think that's pretty special, because then they can help you from going down the wrong pathways or taking bad turns into these other places where you might get sidetracked for 10 years doing something totally funky. It's like these people, they have the lessons, and they've already done the hard yards. And that's something I really got from Tony Robbins, is find someone that's an expert in the field that you want to be good in. Go and learn from them. Don't sit there and bang your head against the wall doing all the things they've already done wrong, when you can just go have a conversation with them, learn from them, take the shortcut. And it's just so smart.
It is definitely.
Save yourself.
And that's one of the basic principles and philosophies of I don't know if you've heard of neuro-linguistic programming, NLP.
Yeah.
So obviously a lot of that is based upon modeling, and like you just said, what Tony Robbins said, it's obviously finding someone that you idolize or finding a lifestyle that you want to live, and literally modeling and copying exactly the way that they've done it. And to use the analogy that you used, is obviously finding the path. So whatever path someone else has taken, like I said, follow that, because like you said, you learn from their mistakes, and it's probably the easiest way to get there.
And that's something in my own life that's really helped, especially in jiu-jitsu. It's like, there are people, I know people that have been doing the sport for over 15 years that, there's belt levels, and that's an indication of skill level, dedication, time spent, things like that. And there's people on, the first level still, the second level still, and, you can progress all the way. And I really, truly believe it's just because they've taken some wrong turns and gone down dead end pathways and spent too much time there when they could have, and maybe that's their journey. Maybe they needed to bang their head against the wall a bit because, there's always, even in my team, I see people taking these paths, but there's always, if you listen, there's always a guide there. There's always someone kind of being like, oh, this is the way. I've been there. So
just on that, I know it's, for some people, it's probably a lot easier to go down those paths and to know which is the right path. But I think I've come across a lot of people in life as well that always seem to make either the wrong mistakes or the same mistakes, or they just don't know which path to go down. And so I think even more so today in society with, we've got a lot more social media and there's FOMO and there's all of that sort of stuff. And I think that's creating even more confusion as to which path people should go down. And, it's sort of like the deer in the headlights analogy. I think because we've got so many different paths now that we can take, people are blinded by the choice. So do you have any advice for people of actually, discovering which path it is that they should be going down?
I think it's something that you need to do some deep contemplation on, deep work, inner work. And I think that's something that if you don't do, you'll continue to make wrong decisions and choices. And I'm sure you know about Tim Ferriss and probably read a bunch of his stuff, but it's really interesting how can I put this in a consolidated way? I don't know. Give me something else. Brain fart.
That's all right. Because I think it's not easy for everyone to try and find that path. And like I said, I think just with the confusion, and like you said before about looking inwards and reflecting. I think that's critical for a lot of people. But when you look at, I think if a lot of people actually if they spend as much time reflecting inwards and looking internally and thinking about the decisions in their life as they did social media, I think a lot of people would be shit scared.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. You already know the answer. The answer is you already know what it is. Your head gets in the way. Your head, your logic, your analytical mind gets in the way of the right answer that's right in front of you. You already know what it is. You need to tap in to your heart. And as guys, that's something that's cheesy, that's bullshit, blah, blah, blah. No. Scientifically, your heart develops before your brain. It has an intuition, it has a knowing. Before the brain even tells it what to do or it gives it any information, it's already working, it's already pumping, it's already doing its thing. It knows, it has a knowing. And I think we've all experienced that point of intuition or that special moment. You just know and you trust it and you go with it and everything works perfectly. There are so many moments like that in our life where we let our head speak louder than our heart and we make shitty choices. We make bad decisions because of FOMO, because of social media, because of outside influences. Whereas if you take the time to do that inner work, just to sit with no social media. I don't know if you saw my post, but it correlates with this book that I read, and it's talking about how we all look to the internet for our answers. We all look for Google, and I do the same. I'm having a conversation and someone mentions something that sounds ridiculous. I'll just bust out my phone under the table and I'll Google it. I'm like, that sounds a little bit far-fetched. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, actually, what you're saying is right. Or maybe it's totally wrong. But I do that a lot. But these answers, the answers to these deep questions that you can't find on Google, your heart knows. You have to close your eyes. You have to turn the internet off, sit with yourself and breathe and actually let the head get out of the way. And the answer will be right there.
Not easy to do.
It's
not
so
easy
hard
to
to do.
For,
It's so
for a
hard
lot of
to
people.
do.
It's very hard.
So hard. And so that's why I think you need a practice. You need a meditation practice or a yoga practice or something that connects you to something deeper than the thoughts in your head.
Interesting you mentioned that. I've just come into my head. There was a scientific study that was done where they had a group of people and they said, would you like to sit in a room with pure silence for 10 minutes or get a couple of electric zaps and then be done with it? And I think more than 50% of the people opted for the electric zaps than sitting in silence, which is really interesting, which I thought was really interesting. Because they said it's not easy for people to actually sit down, turn off and remove themselves from the world and just to think. And I think recently that's what flotation tanks or sensory deprivation tanks have really helped with for a lot of people, because it's just for 1 hour you can go into this little pod and just float in a couple of 100 kilos of Epsom salts and just completely forget about the world.
Yeah, I love them.
And you just mentioned before about the heart and obviously the importance of that plays and how it's played a very important role from the time that we're born, and obviously it acts more of, I guess, our intuition. What's really interesting as well is science has now shown in the last couple of years that we actually have neurons in our heart, which I think is really interesting, because obviously people normally associate neurons obviously with the brain and obviously the firing of electrons and between the synapses and whatever. But the fact that the heart has neurons, I think it's very important, because I think you touched before on like the ego and a lot of these other things, and I think a lot of the Eastern traditions talk about listening to your heart. So maybe did they possess a wisdom that we may not know?
I think there's been an awakening, a conscious awakening, and I'm sure you've seen it. Meditation, yoga, all these things, these esoteric modalities are starting to become mainstream and less weird and less hidden away. For a long time, if you told someone you did yoga and you're a dude and things like that, well, I still get it. I'm like, oh, I do yoga. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And, negative comments. Yeah. What are you, you're a girly guy or whatever it is, like I don't even like repeating it because it's just, I don't connect to that, but I hear it and I'm sure you have before.
Yep.
And it's like the guys that are saying that, they need the yoga. They need yoga more than
they need it the most.
The most.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. And so, yeah, just connecting to that in a way. In the West, I think, more so than the East. I think in the East, it's always been accepted. Like, there's always been mystics. And even in Bali, there's the culture where there's always a transgender person. Like, that's just accepted. They're like, no, that's just how it is. That person feels that way. That's what they connect with. That's who they are. It's not like this thing that we have to accept now. It's just, no, that's just how they are. There's always been that acceptance. And I think in the West, we've put this, to be a man, you have to be macho and you don't cry and you don't show emotion and you're hard and you make the money. And then we have a whole generation of guys who put on the stoic face, do the hard work, and they're dying inside. And they're so broken. And they've just shoved it down and shoved it away. And you see it in their bodies because they're like these rigid rocks. Their hips don't move, their spines don't move. And they're just holding on. And so
I wonder how much of that's come through social conditioning over the past 100 years.
Well, the way our parents were taught, and their parents were taught, it all gets passed down. And like I remember my dad's an awesome human, and I'm so proud of the way he raised me. But I can clearly remember, I'll give you something to cry about. Why are you crying? Why are you crying? I'm going to give you something to cry about. And that made me even more scared because, you're getting a spanking or beating and that was going to be bad. And I remember that this day. And like, I hear that voice when I start to tear up or something like that. I'm like, don't show it. Don't show it. And it's been such a huge weight lifted off my shoulders just to be okay with that. It takes a lot of courage to show emotion in front of people.
For sure.
Because of that stipulation, that it's unmanly to do so, that you're less of a man by showing that you're soft or that showing tears are a thing. Really interesting.
It is really interesting, and I think you've mentioned it, I think, a couple of times in class, and also I was reading an article online where you also mentioned about crying, And I think it's unfortunate that we do live in a society at the moment where, like you said, there is that sort of social stigma attached to men not being able to cry for a multitude of reasons. You mentioned this in the class this morning as well, and I think it's a big part of yoga and a big part of looking inwards is getting that mind-body connection happening and understanding what you're feeling at that particular time and being okay with expressing that emotion. Because, I mean, we can't be on this happiness high all the time, 100% of the time. Like that, if that's the case, you're either pumped up on drugs or you're on a different world, you know what I mean? Because I think it's just being happy all the time, I think, is a very unachievable thing. But I think obviously we have to ride the waves up and down. But, to use obviously like surfing in your background, you just literally have to ride the waves. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. And sometimes I think it is okay to express your feelings, like I said, whether that is crying or whether that's laughing or whatever it is. So what it's obviously you just said sort of you've experienced crime before. I know there was an article where you mentioned where you were in New Zealand at a yoga resort and you were looking out over the beautiful landscape and you saw that and just with sheer gratitude you just stopped and you just appreciated everything that you had and that you shed a tear. So like I said, it's not easy for someone. Sorry guys, if you can hear some little footprints in the background on the microphone, Dustin's got his dog, little Staffy Ninja, with us. So he's just chilling. But it's not easy to be in touch with your own emotions and obviously to fully express them out to express them in a world that may not necessarily be ready for them.
Yeah, I think. But if you think about it, does it make you uncomfortable to see a dude cry or to see a guy cry? If you see a guy crying, and especially it usually goes with a moment. There's something that's happened, like. Because men are very good at stowing that away. Yep. If it's come out, that's big for that person. I don't ever look at that person and be like, oh, you're weak. Ever. Never do I look at that. I look and be like, wow, that moved you. That must have been powerful. That must have meant something.
You've got a very unique lens to be able to view that in that way, I think, though, because I think, a lot of people, I'm generalizing and stereotyping, but a lot of, say, other guys, if they saw another guy crying, wouldn't think that same way.
Really? See, I guess then I'm jaded.
No, but I think you've got an open and a growth mindset because, like you said, you focus on how it's moving them from that perspective, which is all about obviously expressing emotion, developing and growing. Whereas, like I said, with what we've spoken about with the social conditioning at the moment, some men or some other people may view that as a weakness, letting that out in the open.
Yeah, it makes me well up thinking about it because we all, like I said, we all shove it down. We're all just put it down, take a big breath, grit your teeth and move on. And I can't even count the amount of times that I've done that in my life. And there's something very stifling, something bad happens when you do that. Every time that you don't honor that feeling and you just shove it down, it's going to manifest itself in some other way. And whether that's you lashing out at a loved one unnecessarily, maybe he has to use the bathroom.
Okay, we're back again after Ninja's just taken a quick pit stop outside.
Nice. So yeah.
So we were talking obviously about emotions and expressing the emotions and obviously being able to feel or be in touch with the emotions that you are feeling at that particular time and looking inwards. What advice would you give to people in general for being able to stop and reflect, whether it's meditation or whether it's doing, a flotation session or even just like walking meditation? I mean, there's many different ways that people can do that. But what have you found to be the most beneficial over your time?
One of the most beneficial things I've done is implement a daily meditation practice. And that's just something, another Tim Ferriss little tidbit, of all the people he interviews, of all the top performers, they all have some sort of reflection or meditation process that they do on the daily to sort of take command of their life. As one of the generals, I think it was General Patton, one of the most famous generals of the U.S. Army. He interviewed him, and he's like, meditation or sitting and reflecting is like having a map of the battlefield and taking a big step and having an overview of everything that's going on in that battlefield. And then from that, step back, seeing the overall perspective, being able to choose on what actions to take and take control of your life. And Joseph Campbell, really, famous dude, before the internet existed, said, "This is an absolute necessity for anyone today. You must have a room, a certain hour or so a day, where you don't know what's in the newspapers this morning. You don't know who your friends are. You don't know what you owe to anyone, and you don't know what anyone owes you. This is a place where you simply experience and bring forth what you are and what you might be and become. This is the place of creative incubation. At first, you might find that nothing happens there. But if you have a sacred place and you use it, something eventually will happen that will change your life." And so meditation has done that for me. Sitting with myself and giving myself that time to take that step back and to focus on one point, you'll notice that the thoughts will start to slow and fade away. Keep returning the attention to one point of focus, just like in every yoga class that I keep talking about. Same thing to bring you to that flow state. You can do this while sitting still by yourself in meditation. And when you hit that point, it's like the mind turns off, the heart speaks, and you have the answers to your questions. It's pretty special. And it's just like anything. For a while, maybe nothing happens. But if you stick with it, the magic comes with practice.
I know there's another guy that's sort of leading, I guess, the meditation movement here in Australia. It's the One Giant Mind. Have you got I think you've got an affiliation with him, or
he's a good friend, Johnny Pollard.
Yep.
He's an amazing person, and he's who I did my meditation training with. That's how I learned to meditate. And he actually has a free app. It's the number One Giant Mind. And if you're looking to incorporate some meditation into your life, it's such an easy way to do it. In fact, the word he uses is effortless. And that's what it truly is. Before I learned from Johnny, I found meditation weird. And I always questioned if I did it right. And I was just like, what am I doing? I'm sitting here. I'm not meditating because all I'm doing is thinking about stuff. And I think meditation is not thinking about stuff. And so he just laid it out so simply, so clearly. And that's what he actually does in this app. There's a 12 steps. And like I said, it's free. 12 steps to learn. You do it over 12 days. And then he asks that you do a 1 month, 30-day challenge. And if you do this, if you just stick with it, follow the app, all you have to do is put in headphones and follow instruction. Sit with that app for 50, I think it's 10 for the first 12, and then it moves to 15 for the 30. It'll be life-changing. If you stick with it, it'll have a huge, profound effect. So pretty that's what I recommend anyone to start with. And there's lots of apps out there. If that one doesn't resonate with you for any reason, there's also other really good ones. And that's just it. Finding a teacher or someone that speaks to you in a way that you're like, that makes sense to me. I resonate with that. And I'm sure you've probably gone to so many different yoga classes with different teachers. And one of them has described something that all the other teachers are describing, but the way they've worded it, you're like, oh my God, I get it. That's what all those other people were on about. You have that big light bulb moment. You're like, it fits, it makes sense. And so that's what I think it is not saying yoga's not for me, meditation's not for me. Maybe just that style or that teacher or what that wording wasn't for you. If you stick with it, you'll start to disattach from those preferences and you'll realize that everyone has a very similar message. You've been hearing it through a filter. And as you start to release that, it kind of gives you that beautiful, broad perspective.
It's interesting you say that about what one of the teachers said, because it was something you said last year in one of the classes which really resonated with me. And it was, I think you might have got this from your surfing days, but it was about the majority of the time we spend our time, I think, on the surface of the water where it's rough and it's choppy, but we really need to dig deeper and get under the surface that's where all the calmness resides. I think it was something along those lines. And I remember at the end of the class he said that, and that just sort of really stuck with me. It was like, oh shit, that makes perfect sense. Because I think, too often we do sort of just float at the top where it is a bit chaotic. Yeah. And then I think what we've just spoken about, meditation, I think when you reflect and you do that and you look inwards, that allows you to dive deeper. And I think that's where, like iceberg analogy, that's where the majority of things lie, if we're willing to look there.
That's where exactly, the meat of it is. I love that analogy. When you think about it, even on a calm day, there's ripples and there's light reflecting on the surface. There's a lot going on. And even if you're happy and everything's good, there's still a lot going on. There's always this constant stimulus. You need to take that time, and it's like diving down deep where it's darker, there's less activity, there's no light reflecting. It's just like you can sit and absorb. And I think that's the special place that we all need to kind of return to. especially when your mind is screaming, and especially when you're like, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time. That's when you need it the most. And you stop and you give yourself that time, and it's like a reset.
It really is a reset, isn't it?
It's pretty magical.
And so is yoga. Like, I mean, we've done a yoga class this morning, and it's literally reset me. Like whatever troubles we had, it's just gone.
That's what I love about it. It's such an amazing way to start your day, but sometimes that doesn't work. And if you just incorporate it into the daily, and maybe some days, like yesterday, I was pretty busy. I got to practice, but it wasn't a class, like a proper 60 or 90-minute class. I did tune-up, I did breath work, I did some meditation, I did some yin, and that was my practice yesterday. So just starting to do these things and finding these tools and these techniques that truly enrich your life, and also being flexible and not super rigid. Some people think, oh, if I start meditation or yoga, I have to do it every day and have to be religious. Ideally, that'd be awesome. But it's just like starting a new diet or anything like that. If you go 100% all the way, most people don't stick with it. It's too hard. You got to ease your way in.
So what's your routine like then? Obviously, you are a yoga teacher. You're a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu teacher. What's your routine like from a physical perspective and from the
daily day in the life? So depending on my day, I'll usually wake up. I'll do my morning ritual, which is to get up. I do tongue scraping. I do it's just like, instead of, I brush my teeth, but I make sure to scrape my tongue every minute. It's this Ayurvedic thing. I find it amazing.
Tongue scrape, like with the toothbrush, or
it's actually like a little tongue scraper.
Right,
and I did this course, and it was one of the daily things. They're like scrape your tongue and brush your body with a dry brush. And there's 2 rituals I really kept because it makes you feel really nice. They say skin's the largest organ. You just take a dry brush and like skin feels amazing, feels all tingly, but then you notice your skin looks amazing after a few days of doing it. And then the tongue scraper, they say as you sleep, a lot of toxins build up on the tongue. And when you wake up in the morning, there's always that filmy goo. And once you start scraping it and you get that off, you'll start to never want to not do that again. You're like, I need to do this every day. Yeah. That's kind of gross.
Have you ever tried oil pulling?
Yeah, that's interesting as well.
That's another really interesting one.
That's pretty cool. I never really got super into that. I did it for a couple of weeks, and then I was like, yeah.
So for people that are listening, oil pulling is basically, I think it's a tradition that comes from somewhere in India, and they put coconut oil in their mouth, and you basically just swish it around in your mouth, and you sort of just really sort of like gargle on it, and you just as quick movements in your mouth, and it's meant to pull and extract all of like the toxic sort of chemicals and nutrients from your mouth first thing in the morning, and then you just spit it out. So that's a real interesting one. Also, it's meant to help whiten your teeth as well. So
yeah, it is. Like, there's a lot of benefits. They're meant to do it for like 5 minutes, and so I've spent that 5 minutes doing other things. Yes, it's good practice. So scrape my tongue, do my thing, sit and think of gratitudes. So I have a little app. So my wife likes to write in a journal. Personally, I find it easier to type in my app. So I have a 5-minute journal app. And literally it takes 5 minutes. I write down 3 things I'm grateful for, 3 things I want to make happen in the day. So I make sure it's rad. And then a positive affirmation, like whatever, we all wake up and are like, oh, I have to do this or whatever. Just an affirmation and be like, I am an amazing teacher and facilitator, or I am a happy person, or just something positive. It's so easy to wake up and be like, I feel bad. I am tired. I am exhausted. Yeah. I am sore. Whatever you say, I am enough, you'll be. That's what you're going to be. You say you're sore, you're tired, you're going to be sore and tired. Say, I'm happy.
Fake it till you make it.
I feel awesome. I just like, I feel kind of awesome.
But there is a lot of science behind it. The concept of, obviously, in NLP as well, I think it's called future pacing, where you're acting in the state as if, so by saying like, I am happy, even if you're not happy, just the act of saying I am happy is going to cause a chemical change in your brain to start behaving that way as well. And even the act of smiling itself forces, if you just smile, just that action that you make with your mouth sends chemicals to your brain to think that you are actually smiling and makes you feel happy by releasing, I think it's oxytocin or dopamine that it releases. So
that's hilarious.
Really interesting.
It's like when someone laughs and they're fake laughing. I don't know if you've ever been to laughter yoga. If you've not gone,
I haven't yet.
It's the silliest, most. It's a little bit awkward at first, and then you end up laughing so hard and so much, like your cheeks hurt and your abs hurt from laughing so much. And even if you can remember, write it down, Google a laughter yoga class and watch, like, I think Daily Mail or one of these did like a 5-minute video. It's hilarious. And literally that's what it's like. And laughter yoga is something to look into it in itself. But yeah, you fake it till you make it. You smile and suddenly like, oh, I feel good. I feel happy. And there's so many little practices, and like something, if I'm in a bad mood, that I'll do. And one of those is not focusing on gratitude is a huge one for me. I find, science proves that it's impossible to be angry while you're being grateful. It's impossible to be fearful while being grateful. And so it's definitely hard to do in the moment. But when you're pissed off, when something really riles you up, what are you grateful for in this situation? Well, I'm alive. That's a huge one. And then you can start from there. And then, it'll change your perspective. So important that we change from that default and start just to map those patterns. And I think that's why gratitude in the morning is so huge, because it's so easy to wake up and instantly go to all the negatives. And what's the first thing most people tell you when you ask them, how are you doing? Or what's going on with you today? The first thing they go to, someone cut me off in traffic, blah, blah, blah. It's like, how does that even matter? It doesn't, but we make it this big deal. So focus on the gratitudes, reset that default.
And don't check your phone first thing in the morning either.
Try not to do that. It's so hard.
Because obviously that every time you get a notification on one of your apps, that forces a release of dopamine, which is the trigger for, basically it's a drug. So the same chemical pathways are activated when you get a notification. And if you're checking your phone first thing in the morning, you're activating that drug and those pathways. So try and avoid that habit. But like you said, being grateful and actually writing down things that you're grateful for. Like this scientifically documented and proven as well. So it's really, really interesting and really simple to do. Even if you just write 3 things on a Post-it note. I'm grateful for being alive. I'm grateful for this awesome cup of coffee I'm about to have and this awesome day I'm about to have. Simple, really simple.
That's something I'm trying to promote in social media. And I make a lot of, I post on Instagram most days, but a lot of times I'll post on gratitude and I'll even write little things. I'm like, list 3 things you're grateful for below because of that reason. It's like, if I get 5 people just to write what they're grateful for, those 5 people have boosted their happiness, scientifically proven, by 25%. Just by doing that thing, just by writing on my post, they've made themselves a little happier. That's pretty special.
Really easy, isn't it?
That's pretty amazing. And so it's just like, that's another thing that we can do, is just kind of use these tools once we learn them to help those around us. And I think that's another part of the message that I'm trying to put out there, is like, I do all these things and they make me feel good. And what I've learned, or what I feel that my dharma or my mission, my purpose in life, is to do these things for myself. Because once I've learned to do them for myself, I find it easy to help others learn to do them for themselves. And that gives me immense gratitude and joy to be able to do that, because I'm doing this for me, to improve my life, to improve the way I do things and the things that I love. And then it's allowed me a vehicle to share something beautiful with other people, to enrich their lives. It's so nice when we go to the studio and just hear people tell me, like, a woman yesterday was like, oh, you said on Christmas we had a yoga class, and I was just talking about, like, the real yoga isn't here on your mat today. It's when you go to Christmas lunch with your family and just being non-judgmental to them and speaking them with compassion and love, and not letting them stir you. And this woman's like, for the first time in 20 years, my husband's family didn't stir me up. I didn't let it bother me. We had the most beautiful Christmas. I didn't leave angry. I didn't leave upset with them. And I was like, that just made me so happy. I was like, that's why I do this. That is why I teach yoga, because it's making people feel good, just more than physical. And that's what I was saying today in class. Like, I know I make people do handstands, weird poses, poses that actually confuse you as you're getting into them. And we do this. It's not because of the pose. The pose has its physical effect, and it's all positive. I'm never going to have anyone do anything dangerous. But it's not about the pose. It's how you react in it. Where does your mind go? Do you automatically go to like self-depreciating talk, like, oh, you suck at this, or you're going to fall over, or blah, or do you empower yourself? How does your mind work in these situations? Because that's an insight into your life. And that's what's so special. Yoga practice, getting onto your yoga mat daily, is just like a little magnifying glass into these little aspects of your life that are often shaded away, hidden in shadow. And it's like, oh, look, this is what you do every time you're challenged. You tell yourself you suck, and you make it even harder for yourself. You stop breathing. Like, what are you doing? Take a breath, lighten up, and I can do this. It's amazing. Maybe there are other things in your life that are just like that.
I think it's one thing which I think which helps, which is an analogy. It's like the way I view it is the more you get into this sort of stuff, the more you meditate, the more you look inwards, the more yoga you do, it changes your filter and your lens of the way you view the world. And I think there's a brilliant quote, and I don't know who said it, but it's, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I think that was brilliant. And like I said, I think for me personally, and also what you've just sort of spoken about, I think it's moving along that journey. It's all inwards and how you change that filter. And a lot of people, like you said, the person that gets angry in the car on the way to the morning, or the lady that you mentioned at the Christmas lunch, a lot of that people are looking for something else to blame, or they're looking for something external. Whereas I said, a lot of it's that internal factor about how we view the situation and how we react. And you mentioned before about obviously the body with yoga. It's not about the pose. It's not about this. It's more how we respond to the situation. And I think that's critical.
It starts to reveal to us all these little things. It's pretty special.
All should be revealed inside. So we've talked about so many different things which I want to dive deep into. But for yourself, you spoke about Dharma and your mission and about making other people happy. Is that what you think your life purpose is?
I think I did some deep work last year, and really some deep contemplation. I'm like, what really drives me? What truly gives me immense joy? And I have an immense curiosity into my inner world and the way that I work, my anatomy, the way my mind works, the way that I feel. Why do I feel these ways? I'm very curious about these things. And I found that once I learn to do something difficult, which usually is through a process of trial and error and failing, I feel that I can then easily speak and help other people do that same thing with less error, because I've done the errors. And that's why I'm like, don't do that way, because I've already done that way. It's the wrong way, and I want to help you do it easier. And yeah, after all my contemplation and deep work, I think my mission is to continue on my path to help elevate my consciousness to these higher states and these higher levels, and then to lift others to get to that place and hopefully beyond.
Looks like we're on the same mission to help a lot of other people as well. So
yeah, and that's just it. Like someone I really respect, one of my teachers said something very similar. They're like, we're following our life's purpose to be amazing students and to soak up as much knowledge as we can, so then as teachers, we can be the best teachers out there for everyone that we come in contact with. And I feel the same. I feel like that's why I'm here, to soak up as much as I can so that I can then share and spread that with others.
So while we're on the topic of sharing and spreading, one thing I want to talk about, which I think is important, because we've spoken about the social stigma that is attached to men and yoga. And, like I said, it's not all about the hippies and all that sort of stuff. And obviously experiencing yoga, it is completely different to what you think it is. But you work with I think a company or a group called Boys of Yoga. Are you able to explain what that movement's about? Yeah.
So Boys of Yoga is an awesome project started by a man called Michael James Wong. And he's international, actually, but he lives in London now. And he's a very, very organized, awesome human, awesome yogi. But he, like many of us who started yoga, started noticing, like, especially say a few years back, it was really looking, you're going to yoga, you're going to hang out in a little candlelit room and drink green smoothies with a bunch of chicks in Lycra. Like, what do you talk about your feelings? And it's just like, no, yoga's very challenging. Maybe you should try it. Like once you do yoga, you realize. Mm-hmm. But he wants to change that stigma. And so a lot of people that are part of the Boys of Yoga crew, my friend Mark, who is just out here, comes from a pro soccer background and professional athlete. And then he got into rock climbing, and now he's an international yoga teacher and meditation teacher. And just like a lot of the guys, like one of the guys is rock climber, MMA fighter. Another guy is like, used to be a professional ballerina, and now he works in the dance industry. So all these different, doesn't matter what your background is, there's someone in that crew that you probably resonate with that has a similar kind of story to you. And just to see how yoga has shifted their life and improved it in so many different ways. And so that's what it's about. It's about changing that perception that yoga's not for guys, it's for girls. And then I've also heard it from the ladies. Are like, oh, what is this boys of yoga? You want women to stop? It's like, no. If you look at yoga, it's a very female-dominated industry, and that's not bad. We just want to get more guys into it because it just makes people better humans. It's not about men or women; it's about humans. Just elevate consciousness and make people better. And so that's what's pretty special. We do at the last couple of big Wonderlusts, we have this thing we call stand up, sit down. We're like, okay, everybody stand up. All right. All the women sit down. We had 5,000 people at Wonderlust in St. Kilda, and 5,000 people stand up. 4,080. Yeah. There's like 100 guys once all the ladies sit down. And you're like, okay. So as you can see, this clearly demonstrates there's a minority. Guys are a minority in this thing. And we just want to spread that conversation, start the conversation that wouldn't you like your guy to do yoga? Wouldn't you be a happier dude, more conscious? It's what we need. So yeah, really stoked to be part of that crew, doing really good things. And that's just it, just sharing the practice.
And what advice would you give to guys who have typically maybe not looked at yoga in a positive light, or maybe reluctant or hesitant to give yoga a go? For guys out there, I myself was in that same category a couple of years ago. I've got a gym background and a sporting background, for the last 10, 15 years, especially around a lot of gym environments. I'm also a personal trainer. So for me, it was a big step to start in that movement, and completely different to what I'm used to. But I found that now that I'm doing it, I've improved in every way from a flexibility perspective and also my strength. But I think for me, it was once I'm committed to something, it was easy for me because I just go and do it. But for a lot of other guys, there may be a hesitance or a reluctance to get involved. So what advice would you give for guys to maybe get that little baby step happening to eventually lead them to coming to a class consistently?
For a lot of people, we don't want to look bad or feel or start something as a novice or a beginner is hard. It's hard to be, especially if you come from a sporting background or you're good at something, like you're a pro athlete in anything or anything like that. It's hard to then start something new as level one. And I think that's what some guys struggle with. And just, I think what would really help is approaching it without any kind of performance goals. So not thinking like, okay, for me to be doing yoga, I have to do the splits, or I have to be flexible, or I have to do anything. No, you can be literally a rock. You just go do what you can do in the class, and you're going to have the result. You're going to feel amazing at the end. There's no being good at yoga is not really a thing. It's all about how you feel in your body. So you can't really compare it to anyone else or any other shape. So my advice to guys, don't compare yourself to others. Hardest part. Don't compete with others. Also hard. And focus on the way you feel after the class is done. How do you feel affected in the rest of the day? Or how do you sleep at night? How does your body feel the next day? How do all the other things you do, such as sitting your desk or driving your car or walking around, how do you feel in the body as you continue to do some yoga? That, and find a teacher that you like. Like, I'm sure I've been to classes and I was like, yep, never doing that ever again. That was super weird. And then other ones are like, oh my God, that was amazing. That was so good. They spoke to me. They knew exactly what I needed, So
getting the right balance of the energy of the teacher, I think, is critical, because I think, there have been, they said sometimes you might go to a class, you might not resonate with what the teacher's saying or with their energy. And they said it's if you have experienced that, don't be disheartened and give it another go. Maybe another studio, or check out your studio.
Or even the same teacher. Classes often change. Every single day is a bit different. And so one day the focus is something that for you was extra challenging, or even your body on that day, that situation was a little bit hard for you. Don't be like, oh, it's not for me. Try it a bunch of times. One of my teachers said, you can't say you suck at something unless you've done it at least 150 times. If you still stuck after 150 times, maybe you do suck. No. They're like, keep doing it. Keep doing it. It'll make you better.
So a couple of things I want to talk about. You mentioned before, obviously, at the Wanderlust Festival in St Kilda, how there were 5,000 people and 95% of them were female. I want to talk about we've spoken about energy, and I want to talk about the balance of energy that obviously males do bring to a yoga class that are predominantly female sort of dominated industry. What do you think about that? Because I think each individual, obviously both male and females, there is different energies that we have, and I think being able to express them and share, I guess, the energies in a class would be completely different for maybe a more balanced class as opposed to 80% chicks and 20% guys.
I think it does bring a really nice balance, and in everything, there's light and dark, yin and yang, Shiva and Shakti, masculine and feminine. So these balances of energies, even with you and me, they say that the right and left side is male and female. So knowing that there needs to be a balance, and you mentioned before, you were talking about it's impossible to be happy all the time and walk around and just like fake happiness. No, it's like, just like everything, there needs to be a balance. And I think though, if you do focus on the positive, when there is negative, you can help bring yourself back up a little bit quicker. And so that's part of it. If yoga classes are all feminine and all female dominating energy, is that balanced? Is that going to lead to a balanced experience? I think it'd be better if everyone got in touch with both sides.
For sure.
Males with their feminine side and females with their masculine side. And I really like that, another Tony Robbins thing, when it comes to polarity, you need to honor your essence. And whether you're a male and you're masculine, or male and you have a feminine, true to your essence, and when you honor that, then life just flows. I think that's where people in relationships in life, they have these kind of hiccups, the speed humps, when you're just trying to force yourself into a role that's not natural for you. So I think the yoga practice helps balance that out, and that is definitely a part of it. Embracing both energies and trying to find your balance between the two.
Perfect. We'll start to wrap up because I think you've got to head off to another class soon.
I'm going to teach you.
You've spoken before about consciousness, obviously in a couple of different senses. One was obviously you mentioned about you felt that consciousness in general was rising, which I think it is definitely, with obviously more people are aware of what's going on in the world. There, a lot more people are becoming more aware of the foods they put in their body, the chemicals that they're surrounded by. More people are meditating, more people are doing yoga. So I think consciousness is rising. So I want to get your thoughts on that, but also altered states of consciousness, because I think through meditation, through sensory deprivation, through yoga, we can enter different states of consciousness. So I also want to talk about your experience maybe entering altered states of consciousness through the work that you do.
Yeah. I think I really like to view levels of consciousness kind of like levels of the chakra system. And if you start to get into the energy and the focus of each level or layer, it starts to get more elevated and more to that point of universal totality once you get up to the upper levels. And so altered states of consciousness, do you mean like kind of transcending and finding that place of no mind or things like that? And that's definitely a place in meditation that you can definitely find yourself, that point where you're just like, wait, usually some like a sound or the teacher will ask you to come back and you're like, wait, where was I? I've been here the whole time, but I was not in my body. I was like on the moon. And so that transcending feeling is pretty special. And so I've definitely been there, and it's interesting place to be. It's hard to describe. It's like being fully conscious and aware of everything, but feeling like you're not a part of your body or in it or attached to it. Very special. But going back to the levels of consciousness and the chakra system, as you start to work through those different emotions and different things, you'll start to notice in your own life, maybe I am holding on to this. Maybe I'm not speaking my truth. Maybe I'm not listening to my heart. So it is pretty special. I think once you start to become more aware of these things and rise up through them, it's only a slow natural progression.
For sure. We'll start to wrap up because it's been nearly an hour. So what's next for you? What's on the horizon the next sort of 5-10 years? Where do you see yourself?
I will continue with my personal practice and with what I'm doing. But as far as our studio, we're opening a second space this year in a couple months down in Mordialloc, which I'm very excited about. And doing teacher training this year, retreats, expanding and ever growing. And as things, present themselves, we got lots of cool travel experiences. I'm trying to think what is on the agenda. Lots of really exciting things. I'm like super excited actually when I think about it. Fun stuff.
And if you could give advice to your younger self, what would it be and why?
Slow down. Slow down. Enjoy it all. I tend to go fast. And that's what, yogas and meditation has definitely helped me to slow down and to appreciate the subtleties. There's magic in that.
And what's something you'd like to do more of that you're not currently doing?
Surfing. I would love to surf more.
What's stopping you?
The drive and commitments, daily commitments, cold water, laziness, procrastination. No, I cannot wait to go on a little surf trip and go get barreled somewhere warm. That would make me really happy. Got all the yoga I need. I got lots of jiu-jitsu. Now I just need to balance it out with some waves.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
So we've had a fantastic conversation so far over the last hour or so. For people that are wanting to get involved or get in touch with you, I think if you want to talk about your website or Warrior One and where people can find you, obviously there's a studio in Brighton, and obviously you mentioned you're opening up a new one in Mordialloc.
Yeah. You can find me on the internets. On Instagram, my handle is D Brown Yoga. Our studio is Warrior One Yoga, and the website is warrior1yoga.com.au. We're in Brighton, Mordialloc. Come play, come visit.
Definitely recommend this yoga studio. So if you're in the Bayside area, come check it out. They've also got a really good, for the guys, they've got a really good yoga fundamentals class as well, which I think is fantastic, which I started with, which is just going through all of the basic poses and moves for about an hour. So highly recommend that everyone checks that out. Hopefully they can find your Warrior One, and you'll see more. Hopefully from this conversation, you might see some more guys in the studio as well, and we can spread the knowledge with everyone.
Sounds good. Thanks
awesome.
For having me.
No worries. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Aloha.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this fascinating episode. I hope you got as much out of it as I did, and there might be a few pearls of wisdom in there which are really going to resonate with you on a certain level, which you can then implement into your ways of being. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe on your app and share to as many friends as possible who you think might be able to benefit from it. I'm always looking for ways to improve this podcast and make it a better experience for you. I'd be extremely grateful if you write a review on your app and share your thoughts with me. More information can be found at feedmymind.com.au and also on our social media pages. You can follow us on Instagram at feedmymind_ or on Facebook at feedmymindau. Thank you, and stay curious.